Hi guys, and welcome to another Random Platypus video. This time I'm going to be doing a little bit of a tutorial because some people have asked how I've been doing the weathering on some of the buildings and things that I've been making for the Random Platypus game for Salute. So essentially I've done, I don't know if the best example is to see if I can get a bit of the landing pad. There'll be a video going up which may have been gone out before this. Just going to see if I can get a little more light shed in this area. Yep, that works. So you can see this very well. There's the shading that's going on around the edges. There's like a darker, almost kind of like a reddy brown colour. It's burnt. It's actually burnt umber. It's an artist colour. Which I have, it's this one here. It's Reeves acrylic burnt umber. These are sort of some of the, it was actually a leftover paint I had from doing the fantasy board last year, although I got, in the end I ended up getting a bigger pack of this, so I used that instead of this one. Now for this is going to be like one of the support stands of the refinery. Now I think it actually looks a little bit kind of cooler, but I've already done one, so this is kind of what it ends up looking like. With this one, I'm going to drag it back out later. I haven't actually done the whole weathering technique yet. I've got to go around and do some metal, and then what I'm using, I may as well show you the paints I'm using for that. I'm using GW Lead Belcher because it's a nice kind of dark metallic colour, which is kind of nice for, I don't know, if you've been making construction iron or something like that, or steel rather, that's the kind of thing you want. I'm also using Riser Rust to go around and add a rust effect to it. Have a look, if I've just, yeah, it's in reach. So I don't know if you can see on these stairs, but there's a bit more colour to them, so it's not just the brown. I've added some of the metal to it, to sort of chip where it's chipped right away, and then the rust has come in afterwards, just to add a little bit more colour and a suggestion of oxidisation to it where the metal and stuff has been exposed. So yeah, they're going to be the stairs up to the landing pad. Put them back over here, so knock everything off the table. So yeah, so essentially one of the first things I've got to do is bring this up to colour. I've undercoated it with, I really can't remember the name of it, but it's like a GW kind of khaki style colour. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter on this one. Again, it's kind of a deliberate thing, and for that I'm using miniature paints, sand, to make it this colour. Now that'll probably mean I shall put some music on and maybe speed it up, because it's essentially not that fun to watch. But just to give you an idea of how I'm actually doing it and what I'm using, I've got a couple of you can see what these are. These are the parts that you pluck out of the foam when you get your miniature foam. Sometimes they come with the foam in place and you have to pull the sections out, so obviously this would be the space left is for a miniature. And what I'm actually doing is, rather than spray painting it, mainly because I'm a little lazy, and B because I've just found this to be really useful. That's your clue to what I do later on, because you can see I use that colour. So I'll be applying the sand colour with the sponge. It shouldn't take too long, and then I'll come back and talk to you about how I do the weathering with the brown, with the burnt umber later. Alright guys, enjoy! Right, we're now ready to do the rusty bit, because this is all, as you see, it's dry. Not any, that's actually paint I think was already on my hands. Double check it. Oh, there's a little bit of wet paint from the edges in there still, but as we're kind of not going to be doing that, that doesn't really matter. Plus I want to show you, so I don't want to spend all day trying to get something that I can show you. So you don't need as much of this. And the best technique I can, like the closest technique to what I can call this is it's almost like a dry brushing. You don't really want the paint to be too wet, so I don't add any water to this one for that reason. And you want to get your foam piece. I'm just trying to find one that's going to do the business for me. Yeah, let's go for this. It's nice to have an edge on it. I think probably ideal to have an edge on it. Like I said, I've been using this foam from your miniature cases, but as you saw the last one, that has been breaking up a little bit. I don't know, I haven't tried it, but it might be worth having a look at those foam scouring pads you can get, but they normally have the foamy bit and then the harsher scouring bit on the front, and it might be that you can use the softer bit to just the same extent. I mean, I would contemplating using a pair of kitchen scissors or something to cut it into blocks, because it just makes it easier to manipulate and use to paint with. Now with this bit, it's all about contemplating where is the weathering coming from. So if you're doing an aeroplane, some of the weathering on the wings will be to reflect the direction of the airflow and the dirt getting trapped and left on the wings, or some of the weathering on the paint chipping off in that kind of direction, so you'll have the streaks going with the airflow. On pieces like this, you've got to think about how is it corroding, how is it getting weathered. And as you can see on this one, I've tried to, where possible, sort of go downwards and suggest like downwards weathering, so elements, things like water, moisture, precipitation, that kind of stuff is going to be the stuff that, where that collects, is going to expose the undercoat of the structure, or the bare metal underneath that, and therefore then the rusting. And it's all going to happen in very similar places. You don't tend to get rust randomly appearing. The rust appears where the exposed metal is. So what you do is you get your sponge, good old dab on it, make sure that there's not too much. You want that kind of a thing, and then I'll show you. This is the most obvious bit for me to start on, either in the middle or at the top. But you just get it. Let's see if we can get that along that top piece, and then you just drag it down like that. Now the corners and the sides are always a little bit harder to do, and there's nothing wrong with going over it if you think there needs to be a little bit more paint on there. Better a little less to begin with than too much, because too much is harder to hide, because you want it to be quite strong, otherwise you see too much of the paint beneath it coming through. That's no good, because this is meant to be, you know, the paint's meant to have gone. Now as you can see already, that's looking quite nicely weathered, just that piece. Obviously the bit underneath I want to weather around the edges just because it gives it a nice defined look, but I don't want so much. It's going to be a little bit more broken up, and you have to be a little bit more careful with it. But as you can see, I've done that there. It's not like a very thick line. I still want a little more, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with using your brush to add a little bit of water to that dry area, just to make it more moist again, if that makes sense, as I'll show you in a second. It's like this, especially if you're like me and my man cave's got a little fan heater in it. Yeah, can dry that a little too quickly sometimes. So there you go. Now I'd always suggest trying to go with the edges first, so the easiest places, and like I say, try and get the angle you want, and almost let the sponge do the work. You don't mind it going a bit haywire in places. Weathering is never very even, and it's never quite the same in every patch. So look, I've made a mistake there. You could say I've gone on the top bit. That doesn't really matter. because you'll see in a minute it'll blend in after a while. So that's this is another reason why I've added, if you go on the TTCombat website, and you'll see the parts of this structure, I've added some cardboard detail to it, just so that the weathering, I've got a bit more weathering to do on it. Oh god, that really has gone a bit bad. But as you can see, it's fine. It's going to fit. It will work. Now I like doing these bits because although you might think, well, that's going to be where, obviously this here is where one of the slots are, that's also going to be an area where water or dirt is going to collect, so that's perfectly fine. And even underneath it, so I'm just going to go down the edge of this relatively carefully. As you can see, that's doing exactly what we want it to. Now I like to do both at once if you can. And if you see, it just exposes that edge a little bit more, like that. So there's kind of, it is that simple. I'm not really, you know, there's nothing to this. I'm no master painter or anything like that. It literally, I did a bit of experimentation with this. I mean, I know sponging stuff isn't anything new. There's, you know, artists do it. There are model makers that like to do it to add like paint, like mud splatters and things, because it can be quite effective for that. And I just thought, well, if I drag, what happens if I drag the sponge along the edge? Does it give me the effect that I'd like? And it's quicker and less taxing than using a brush to do the same sort of thing. I have tried using the brush to do the same thing on more intricate parts such as these, but it still doesn't seem to have the same effect. And sometimes the mistakes or the bits that you didn't want to touch getting a bit coated is exactly what you're looking for. So it's kind of one of those things where you almost just let it do its work. I'm not going to say it paints itself, because that's just not correct. You kind of have to know. This bit here and here is always a little bit awkward. Yeah, got it. So yeah, I mean, as you can see, I'm just going to do this top bit because you don't want me to watch me do the whole blooming thing. You've already seen the other bit. So as you can see, it is really that simple. Now there might be times where you want to make a bit look really, really rusty, and you just go over it a bit more. And it's that, it is literally, as you can see, it's not, I'm not, as I said before, I'm no master painter. This isn't anything, this isn't like an amazing world-class technique with an airbrush or a really skillful applied bit of freehand work. It's a very basic bit of paintwork, which I think to be honest with you, I think most people could easily master. It's not particularly complex. It's not like I'm the pioneer in it. So as you can see, I've pretty much in a few moments just capped off the top part. So obviously I think these are the most complicated bits. I have used a brush on some of them, but like I say, it just doesn't give the right effect, I don't feel. And like I say, you might want to just see like that. You can't necessarily predict exactly where it's going to go, but I think it works better that way. Gives you more of a authentic, splattery kind of feel to it. What I do sometimes do is, once I've done the rough bits, and I think the edges need a bit of darkening, I have gone round with a brush then just to add that line in some places to because you can see sometimes when when you try to put the paint on, it sometimes almost takes it off the actual edge, which is the bit you're trying to darken. Because in most cases that's where weathering is going to happen. Now, if you think there's an area that needs breaking up more, what you need to do is wait until there's even less paint on your sponge. Like I say, we'll get there in a second. Once I've done some of this. Like there, that's meeting up, so you can just go over it. Do you see what I mean? So that it looks like the weathering there is joining up. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I've done that on a number of places on my models. Yeah, that's kind of really nicely. I'm happy with that actually. So, as you can see, I've done that top part in quite quick time. I need to sort of just reduce the amount of paint on here, so I'm just going to go around and do the edges quickly on the other bits. Well that's kind of helpful. Again, I almost dropped that, so of course my instinct was to try and grab it, and I've got a bit of dirt, a bit of paint, not exactly where I wanted it, but it doesn't matter. It's especially in this build anyway. I'm not wanting it to look super neat. It's weathering. It doesn't look neat. Right. So let's just go and get some of the paint off this. So say this piece here, or the piece up here, there's a bit. You want it a bit grimier, right? So you want to get that kind of, and you can't see it precisely. Oh, now you can. But if you just do that in and around some of the edges, oh, look, you see that? So I'll do a bit there as well. It just brings out a little bit more. So yeah, that's essentially how you do that. I'm just going to use up the rest of this paint, and then I'm going to go back to my other one and show you what I do with a paintbrush to add the metallic and stuff to that. So this is just going to be really quick. So I shall speed this up. I shall see you in a minute. Paintbrush. It doesn't need to be anything amazing. You're probably going to burn through them quite quickly on corners of MDF. You just get your lead belcher, or whatever your darker metallic colour is, a sort of gunmetal, a dark gunmetal colour. You don't need a lot again because you're not going to be painting it all over. You don't want every patch of the metal, the weathering to have metal on it necessarily. I tend to just go in around the corners, and I don't paint all the way along. It's going to be hard for you to see on this. I'm going to have to, just hit my little table bench lamp out of the way. Bear with me. I might be able to zoom in and help out a little bit with the old seeing of it. You see, that's probably a bit better, isn't it? As long as I don't move my hand, you can see what I'm doing. So there, I could. So again, if you go with the direction of it, you can just bring it down. This brush is kind of almost having had it, to be honest with you. So again, just expose some of those points where it's really, you see that on there? Yeah, good. So wherever it's really obviously extreme, that's where you want to be exposing your metal. It's one of those horrible things that you're going to spend time doing, and I know this will be the case, especially for the salute tables, that people won't. They'll look at the overall thing, go, wow, that looks really well weathered, but they won't think, oh god, look, little bits of exposed metal. But unfortunately, for the overall look, you kind of need it. So yeah, that's just literally go around some of the edges, adding a bit of metal in. Now I only do one lot because I don't particularly want to spend ages doing on it, but I guess after the Rise of Rust you could easily go around again, either with the same silver or perhaps a slightly lighter silver, and almost like highlight it. No need to though, really. I just think that might add another layer of depth to it. I tend to just add the rust after this bit, which I shall do in a second. So yeah, I'm only really doing this at this point just to show you the weathering thing. I don't really want to go around too much of it, so I am now literally going to just clean off the silver. Obviously on this I would normally do all of the silver on both sides and then do all of the rust, but that's just going to bore you even if I just put some funky music on with me doing that. So as you can see, that's what it would look like before, and that's what it's kind of looking like at the moment. And then yeah, get your old Rise of Rust out. You might still need your tissue for that. Whatever you do, do not use your best sable brushes for this, because you'll get frustrated that you've wrecked them. And you get your bit of Rise of Rust out. You actually need more than you realise. There's a lot of it you put on the tissue. Right, so you get your Rise of Rust, you go where your metal is, and you just add that in. Don't know if that's coming up very well, probably not, if you need a bit more. What I found with Rise of Rust is dry brush on the areas that you want, and then if the colour isn't thick enough, go back and add, because it adds like a kind of depth to it. So hopefully you can see kind of what I'm doing, which is to add rust in and around those areas where we've got the exposed metal. So there, it's not very clear, but if you go over it again, you can see that it's starting to come out a bit more. And like I say, I think it might be a case of going round. In fact, I might actually do it on this one because the grey is a bit more of a domineering colour anyway. On this one, it looks like it'd be better if I did. So as you can see, that Rise of Rust is. I mean, I sometimes do add it on here without the metal, but it's already a suggestion that there's metal there anyway. So like I say, that Rise of Rust is already now drying up, but hopefully just that part alone you can see how that works. But that's literally as simple as it is. It's not a difficult technique, and I think anybody can do it, and I think it works really, really, really nicely for your MDF kits. It just makes painting them a little bit easier. I spray undercoated all of these. Again, I recommend don't bother painting your MDF kits by hand, because they tend to need sealing. And the handy thing with spray paint is it seems to seal it and paint it, especially if you get something like Halford's Grey undercoat, which I use for miniatures as well. It's a little bit cheaper than anywhere else, like in terms of undercoats. It is grey, and I think you might be able to get black and white as well. But I just find it works really, really well. And like I say, you end up with really quite nicely weathered pieces. So yeah, that's just a very simple but effective technique on how I'm going to be weathering the pieces for salute when the camera's not falling on me. Alright guys, I'll catch you next time. Bye bye now.